Hey everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Snapchat. I'm joined today by none other than Cozy Snap. Cozy, thought I'd ask you. You've been playing a lot of Alliance missions, you've been playing a lot of Marvel Snap. What has been your go-to deck when you're offline, just chilling, kicking your feet up, and just trying to win some cubes?
I like this question. I always appreciate this question. Go-to deck. It's been a lot of Surfer, a lot of buff Surfer, a lot of bald power Surfer But you know why? It's because you could just put in so many counters in those. Like, just Killmonger fits in there. Zeus so popularized. Might as well throw that in a lot. And a ton of double-up decks. Double-up decks with She-Hulk has been my flavor of the month.
I want to talk about Silver Surfer.
Oh. Well, yeah, but you always do. That's your thing. That's always been your... So what's another deck outside of Surfer? I think the viewers know you play Surfer. What's another one?
Okay, I've been trying to play some Arnim Zola Destroy lately. Just because I want to see Arnim Zola go down. And I've been trying to do like the whole X23 into Null into Zola thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, listen, I know I could Zola Venom, but that looks so obvious half the time that I just don't play that line at all, and I just drop a Null or something like that. But I'm really after that Zola Null gameplay. I even thought about pulling out your Jane Foster Null Zola deck. I was like, Cozy has a solid deck for that. And I was like, well, maybe we'll get into it at some point, Cozy. But have you been playing any other card games lately?
Any other card games? Nah, not too much. I'm trying to think. No, not really. There are some that I've looked into, but Snap is all consuming at the moment.
Yeah, I know, man. But I'm taking a bit of a break this weekend, Cozy. Would you believe that I'm going to be competing in the Lorcana, which I just said totally wrong. Lorcana regional at Toronto, right? So I'll be in Toronto playing in the Lorcana Major Challenge. So if you happen to find yourself in Toronto at the Lorcana event, please be sure to come say hello. Even if I'm mid-game or, my mascara is running from my tears of going like 0-15 or whatever it's going to be, right? Definitely come say hi. I'd love to see you because I'm going to be playing Lorcana in Toronto with some friends for the tournament. So I'm actually excited. And you know what? I feel like playing some other games here and there have made me better at Snap, right? Like having an understanding of how Magic works and how Lorcana works and how Altered works and, all these different card games. They help to inform, just general best principles when playing all sorts of games, specifically Marvel Snap. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, two things to say on that. First, I have been my chill game to unplug. I'm trying. It's so hard to game to relax now because it's like what I do every day. And it used to be my way to like stress relief, and now it's not that it brings stress, but it's my work. But Fallout 4, I haven't played it since it came out, and I got some mods for it. And there's something about getting lost in like big games like that. I resonate with. I love it. I put a couple hours in, do a mission or two, call it a day. So I've been doing a lot of Fallout. Been a lot of fun getting back into the Nuketown, into all that good stuff. And then the other thing is, dude, listen. Next to Marvel, right here, the most useless knowledge I have is anything and everything about Disney. I did Disney content creation before all this stuff, and so, dude, I know there's not a Disney character I don't know.
That's actually pretty impressive. You'd be really good at, picking Lorcana cards.
It's impressive, but I never use it, dude. I don't, if my son asks me who's that fish on screen, I can be like, well, so let me tell you about Dory. Dory's not a deep cut, but yeah, I got some deep cuts I could throw at you one day. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, good luck, man. Let me know how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it goes better than Wiccan did this week, because Wiccan, honestly, Cozy, has been a little all over the place. My impressions were actually relatively positive. You came in at 2.5, I came in at 3. And I actually liked him 3 stars. Like in my review video, my first impression, you know what? Was he great? No. But did he do his thing effectively? Yes. And when he popped off, and if he didn't, the 4-7 felt okay to play. It wasn't completely detrimental. And when he did land his hits there, then he was actually a major contributing factor to me winning games. It took a lot of deck brewing to kind of get to the point where even just one deck was performing decently. We're seeing him perform pretty decent in unfortunately, Erisham still being a major part. We're seeing him being played in Cersei style, Annihilus based decks, some minor experimentation. Those are really low play rate, but decent win rates, but still in the low 50s range. On aggregate, Wiccan is unfortunately running a 47% win rate, negative cube rate at 10% meta popularity. So people have definitely given him a shot, but he's underperformed.
I've played Wiccan more than any new card probably in the last month. I've played a lot of Wiccan. It has been my most played card. I've been playing a lot of Wiccan to figure him out. I think he's a very interesting card. I love that he's not straightforward. We've said that before in the Snapchat. It was pretty obvious, pretty fast what works with him, what doesn't, and what his biggest pros and what his biggest cons are. And as I said on my side of the earlier, is we found out just how hard it is to reliably have 1 and 2 and 3 played on curve. And so right away, I think the deck that I've had the decks that I've had most success with are ones where you either have to generate cards because you would get his energy and you're like, hell yeah. But then there was nothing to do with that energy. You would run out of cards very quickly. So you needed ways to get more and more cards, right? That's why Arisham's not a bad idea. That's why Coulson and Generation cards aren't bad. So the Devil Dinosaur stuff, I thought that was kind of fun with Coulson. And then the other stuff, Alex, was, I guess, before I spoil all of our talk with him, are you on the camp of Quicksilver Domino or the other side?
I lean towards, if I have to play Quicksilver and Domino in a deck, then I don't want to play that deck. Definitely no Domino. I was playing some Quicksilver and he felt okay. It wasn't awful to give up turn 1, or, one draw on turn 1 and just have one drop in your deck. I think Domino's absolute copium. I don't think that should be in anyone's deck at all. Quicksilver was acceptable, but I tended to like the Athena-based packages with like Kitty Pryde. But even then, I found myself, if I was really trying to lean into the Wiccan plays, I was like, do I actually put Quicksilver with a Kitty Pryde? Because what if I don't top deck Kitty Pryde? And if I do, then now like I have Quicksilver anyways, which is really weird. It felt like a kind of dumb play. But then again, I could play Kitty Pryde Quicksilver on turn 2 to keep that curve going. It was very awkward. But I'm in the camp where Domino 100% should not be in the deck, and Quicksilver I would accept. But I think statistically, he's underperforming in Wiccan decks.
So I've put hours into this. A couple things. First of all, the easiest way to understand Wiccan at this current moment is he's Mr. Negative, right? So no matter how good Mr. Negative decks can pop off, they're not going to have a 55% win rate. Almost never, because the reliability of card draw. It's just not going to happen that often. And so that's why you're going to see low stats on them. And I don't really care about the stats. I just don't on Wiccan. I think it's going to be largely different for different people. I will say, I do think that Quicksilver and Domino definitely have their decks, both of them. I think Domino, so the thing about the 1-drops is that it's sometimes great to have both of them. The only decks that works out reliably are ones with a good amount of 3s, and then your early plays don't matter. So I had kind of a wicked Miracle deck because Sarah, you just don't care about the early turns, and so it doesn't matter, 1 and 2, and you can really fill up the later turns and do some super creative stuff. I think we have not seen the end of like a wicked Miracle deck, or just big top-heavy decks towards the end. That makes sense. I would have decks with just Quicksilver, just Domino, and again, those ones where the end plays were so impactful, both of them. I liked having Domino on a couple of decks where there's so many 1-cost cards that have high impact. Nico being great to draw in there to try to get the Nico more, the Wiccan more. And the thing is, I love the ways that 1s can get you to play on turn 3. And that was super viable in a lot of what I was trying to pull off with Domino as a whole. And so it kind of depended on the deck, bro. But I actually enjoyed both of them in a number of different cooks.
I thought it was very interesting that Wiccan's effect was completely negated if you happen to miss a turn. And that's where I felt like, for me personally, when testing him with an Arishem, which I didn't play a lot of because people find Arishem pretty cringe, and I know I feel bad playing it. Turn 1's difficult for Arishem, right? It can be difficult sometimes. Like, you accidentally float 1 energy, you have a 1-drop, and you have 2 energy. You're like, well, damn, right? Wiccan's dead already, which I think could be a little frustrating. But like the advantage of speed is that speed does not care about, if you're playing on curve. But Wiccan, if you miss your 1-drop, then it just dies, right? And I had this thought, it's like a shower thought of, what if Wiccan lost an energy if you missed him once? Like, what if you missed turn 1 and now only gives +1 energy? Could that be a really interesting, like, kind of redo over of what Wiccan is? Because I do think that if you ideally hit him perfectly getting the max 2, but maybe you play off curve once, it drops down to just, like a
I like it. I don't think it'll ever change. I think the math statistics right now on how hard it is to hit those first couple turns and where all the decks lie, I think they're going to be happy with it. I think it would be overplayed if any of his numbers were touched. That's my personal thought on it. And not to make him more great or anything like that. And not that I don't want him better, but I think he'd be at that point overused, because then everyone's going to be putting him in these shells that are much easier to get him out there and just have the energy gain on, unless you have released cards that could counter max energy stuff. It would be probably my thought on that overall. I think they wanted him to be this kind of weird niche Mr. Negative style of play.
So yeah, I absolutely agree. Like he did open up a whole new type of way of trying to approach deck building in Marvel Snap. We haven't quite landed on the ideal deck for Wiccan, but clearly he does have potential. I just don't think he's reached it yet. And so my question would be to you is, do you think there's going to come a time, right? Because people are watching this on Monday. It's basically the last day to get Wiccan. Do you think there's going to come a time where Wiccan's going to find himself in a shell where he's irreplaceable and that deck is performing in the high 50% win rate and people are going to regret not picking him up?
I don't know. I'm not convinced. Like, I thought maybe that would happen with the Grandmaster and it didn't, right? At this time, unless we as a community all really invest in him, because he does take a lot of commitment to really learn the ins and outs. And so I'm not convinced. Maybe if they change Zabu with Activate, like if they mess with some of that stuff, then possibly. It's tough. I think that speed will be used more long-term in other decks competitively, but Wiccan does more for your unique archetype play, right? I think Namora is a better card in that example of opening up this whole other avenue and a better example of that. I will say, though, because of how they reworked Thanos, they almost had probably one of the most broken decks. Wiccan and Thanos was actually really fun because if you didn't make it happen, who gives a damn? You have a 4/7 kind of worked out, throw them in a lockjaw, do whatever you want. But Thanos starts in your opening hand. The Thanos of old would have been the best, absolute cracked place for Wiccan. It would have been the best deck in the game. But it's cool that this all happened and intertwined together because it works in Thanos, but thank God he's there or else it would be too good.
Yeah, because then like obviously Thanos obstructs one of the draws, right? And that's what makes it hard to play Wiccan. And obviously Quicksilver does the exact same thing. I lean towards... I think that you probably don't roll Spotlight keys on Wiccan if you are free to play or you have limited resources. No. And I think that you would reserve this situation for like, okay, if Wiccan pops off and that's the kind of deck I want to play, commit your 6,000 tokens to it. I can very well see Wiccan kind of falling to the wayside slightly. Could he see a buff? Potentially. I think the effect is strong enough. I think that much is apparent. 2 extra energy on turn 3 or 4 is pretty damn wild. But you touched on Zabu. Zabu felt awful in those decks. Like, Zabu literally made those decks worse because he's only doing one thing to get Wiccan out. And if you have Zabu on turn 2 and then Wiccan's still in your deck, like the decks I had designed, I was like coping with, okay, well, I have Zabu out. I'm going to play more 4s. So I was trying Miss Marvels. I was trying Iron Lads to dig in for the Wiccans and stuff like that. Like, I was trying to make Zabu work, but he felt so bad. Right? And so if Zabu gets buffed, then in theory, then Wiccan comes alongside with that. But if you have limited resources, it's probably worth waiting, I would say.
I would say this, I would say for the vast majority of Marvel Snap players, probably don't get Wiccan. Yeah, you don't need him. He's not going to enhance. I don't think he's going to be a deck that crazy pops off outside of buffs to other cards, which, could happen, I guess. But the main thing is, if you do want to play a fun card with fun deck design and you have time to play the game a lot to put together fun decks, then you would like Wiccan. But that's the only case that I would probably say where you want that to work together. But yeah, and then we even just talked about Speed and Wiccan don't naturally have clear and obvious synergy because of having to use some of that energy later anyway. And we're going into a banger month. And so that would be probably my overall recommendation too. Probably pass on the card. By probably, I mean pass on the card. I would agree, man. But overall, he encouraged me to play the game more than I have in a long time.
And it brings us to a discussion which I think is very important because Wiccan, we're kind of leaning towards pass for sure, despite the fact that it has potential. But what happens when Wiccan gets buffed, right? This is kind of the question. It's running 47% of a win rate right now on the lower end. But what happens when Wiccan becomes a 4/8, a 4/9? Or if they institute that thing that I discussed prior, and suddenly Wiccan is so much more powerful than he was at launch, but no longer in the Spotlight keys. And I think it's worth discussing, right? And I think it's a pain point for a lot of community members where they say, hey, listen, I am a free-to-play player. It took me months because these collector's reserves are terrible. I'm getting 100 tokens each one. I finally had 6,000. I got Nocturne because literally the week before, Cozy and Alex were talking about the best token shop investments. And then you nerf the card. And I promise we had no idea that was coming. I promise you we did not know that, Cozy. I can see how that's a pain point for people.
Oh, for sure. I think there's a lot to break down in this category. It's one of the, earlier in the week, I was like, Alex, this is something I think is important to talk about. first of all, it feels like a moment. We're moments away from like something like Copycat going down in PowerPoint. Like it almost just feels like we can now tell when things are going to happen, and by what I just mentioned, play rate, but also how good they are. And it can be frustrating for us too, because just like that, right? Like our videos get dated very quickly in this game because of the rapid changes, and I totally get all of that. And it's frustrating, man. I putting myself in the shoes of somebody, I do this for a living, so I'm just have it scheduled out to get all these cards, right? That I have to pay for. But for someone that's being more calculated, it's so tough because it's like that back and forth. I will say that the balance team has done good in terms of balancing the game, and I think there's not a ton of releases that have been overly broken, and so I do give kudos to that. The thing we're seeing is that I think there's not enough balance being done beforehand or testing, and this is not a knock to the balance team. I think they, Glenn and them are great. You guys know I like you guys, but it's a new card's coming out every week, right? And so instead of doing a bash and testing all those, you're having to test stuff pretty quickly, and so there's gonna just be stuff that gets under the radar pretty quickly when the masses and masses get onto it. Kind of like the beta, right? We had a billion cards out, but it wasn't until live release that we saw that Leader and Leech together was just a crazy combo. And so like when it gets to the masses, it's so much easier for us to test it. So the way that is involved is a bummer. When it comes to the conversation of OTAs, and sorry to go on a rant, hopefully this is answering people's questions though, but when it comes to OTAs, there are a lot of free cards that have been sitting in the wayside that are now usable, and or bad cards that were released like US Agent that immediately got better. But the Ultrons, right? Like, I'm super glad that we have that for those style of cards, and I think we're getting a fair balance of those, but it doesn't negate the tokens that are lost, and that sucks.
There's I really do not envy the balance team at all, because let's just be honest, right? We had a run of cards that were that were released, like the OG Loki and stuff like that. But those seemed, to some degree, obvious that they were going to be extremely powerful. But let's not forget that it is very hard to evaluate cards in a vacuum, which is what we try to do every single week, right? Everyone has varying opinions on different cards. But here's a great example. Everyone almost universally was down on OG Blob. OG Blob was not a card that people were excited about. People said it's just going to get Shang-Chi, it's just going to get Shadow King. Cozy, literally on your first day, you got it over 100 power in your opening video, right? It was so unbelievably cracked in meta warping, and yet almost universally people were down on that release. So think about how it is from a designer standpoint, where you're testing, you're like, man, this card's actually cracked. Is it too powerful? Should we nerf it? And people are like, before the release, this card probably sucks. 2 stars, 3 stars, or whatever it is, right? Across the board. I think it is so hard in a vacuum to evaluate these cards that even for us, it's challenging. I can only imagine how hard it is for the design team, right? And you hit the nail on the head, which I've said twice now on this podcast. Once it gets out to the masses, right? Once it's out there, millions of people are playing the card. Not only are you getting more data, it's obviously incredibly valuable, but more people are going to cook, more people are going to brew, and it's getting into the hands of players that want to break that card, that want to push that card to its absolute limits. And, listen, if I was tasked, hey, Alex, break this card, you got 24 hours, then would I do it? I don't know.
And what's more important is a game that doesn't get stale quickly. And what I mean by that is if they leave some of these cards the same, which goes back to the balance conversation, but if they left the cards the same, then the game's dead, because then you just only run these cards, and you only run that whatever it is. And part of my ignorance here, but has there been a card that was released in a 3-month gap, that was buffed or nerfed in a 3-month gap, that completely killed the card? Because Zabu and them, yes, but that was out for a year. I don't think so. I think that Thena is still very good. I think that, these cards that were mad that they get nerfed or whatever happens to them, and I get it, because you didn't buy what was hot when it was doing its thing. The Red Hulk when it was going huge, massive, right? But High Evo, for example, has done okay. But it's challenging, because you almost want to look at the middle of the pack performers that are the sages that are under the radar, that are the best buys, because they're not going to get nerfed or buffed. It's the whole reason why I have an adjustment category on my new card videos, because I have to try to predict and play this game with it. But is there something, I don't know if they have nerfed things to oblivion, where any buy that you have is now completely, you've lost out majorly on it.
I think people are going to feel that way, though. Like, I think that there are people like, hey, like I bought Eliath, and then they nerfed it to the ground, and then have slowly brought it back over a couple months, right?
Yeah, Eliath
that's
was
probably a
quickest.
good one, a good example.
Eliath, that was last October, so about a year ago. But it was, yes, that's probably the best. That's probably the best of the quickest turnaround that we've seen on a card. What's his name? Annihilus. I'm trying to think of some of these. Like, these got touched up. Miss Marvel was pretty quick for a season pass card. But I'm trying. You know what? I'm trying to think. Like, they still act as the way they should. A good amount of these. Nocturne, in the nature of what she does, I totally get the frustration where that can come from. White Widow, on the other hand, still does her job just fine. So it does depend, I guess, what the card's identity is a bit.
And I guess part of the challenge is, okay, so we're understanding and kind of sympathetic to the fact that it is hard for the development team to kind of like, you know, determine the power strength of a card before kind of releasing it to the world as a whole. But like, listen, a pain point is someone who just bought Nocturne has that card get nerfed significantly. It's still viable, but, you know, Collector does not offer refunds. A very aggressive and ruthless approach to the spending of currency. In Hearthstone, if a card got nerfed, you got your dust back, right? You got the value of that card back in dust. We don't have dust here. We can't craft cards. And so they just take this blanket approach of no, like you lose your resources. I'm sorry, right? You couple that with very infrequent series drops, and suddenly players are, you know, spending months accumulating these resources. They buy the Nocturne, and then Nocturne gets nerfed. The only silver lining is that I truly believe the development team's goal and ambition is to make all cards viable, and they're not trying to kill Nocturne. They want it to still be a good card, but they just need to shave a little power off. And unfortunately, that card has almost no dials on it. Like, what do you do to it? Arisham's filled with dials. Nocturne, you got to take a power off. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I kind of feel for them from that standpoint, but there's no refunds. Should they be introducing something to kind of ease that pain point?
Yeah, I feel for you guys for sure. When you are only getting a couple cards, you pull the trigger, and they're out there, man. They're out there. Like the guys out there, the girls out there that got Nocturne on Wednesday, you know, and then bam, just completely nerfed right after that. That just stinks. That is a bummer, and so I think that shows the you know, some of the flaws there for sure, and I can get that. But yeah, overall, I think just a healthy conversation on it. I think OTAs are great for the game. I'm going to back that up all day. Love what it does for the free cards in the game. Thank God there's not a lot of paid toxic cards. I think we're not going to see a lot of toxic cards because Eliath was the last one and kind of Annihilus, and those got touched up. But like Sandman, Leech, those are free cards, so they can chop those off and kill those cards, and people aren't going to care as much. But if a Leech was a card that just came out and then it was, you know, neutered like that, they would have to figure out what to do. Yeah,
that's absolutely fair. And like, it leads to a question though, and this is something that like a lot of people have a difficult time answering. Would you rather they release cards slightly overpowered or slightly weak? Like, would you rather they lean towards, okay, this is going to be meta shaping, or would you rather them be more conservative with their new card releases? Assuming you can never hit it perfect, right? You're never going to hit it perfect. 52% win rate.
So,
you know what I mean?
The gamer in me says conservative because I've been a part of so many games like of the old, if you guys played MOBAs, you always knew when a new character came out, you like play it now because it's going to come out 2 weeks dead, and then it's going to be dead, right? And like you came accustomed to that, and then it felt super annoying. The conservative approach is tough too because you don't want new cards to suck, and then you get it and it's awful. But in this case and how it works on this weekly basis, might be better conservative because we do have OTAs in the long run, right? And you can go back and get it, or it gets better over time. Definitely, you know. Again, I think there are obvious cards when we see them. Like, this is just going to break the game. Like, how is Red Hulk coming out as he's coming out here? And so some of those are very obvious. Yeah, what about you? Conservative, I would assume?
You know what? Honestly, I lean towards on the powerful side. I think that I want cards to come out and be exciting to play. I want them to change the meta. The way that, like, to some degree, Cassandra Nova came out and Erisham kind of went down in play rate, right? I think that's important.
The anger doubles down, though, then, because if they get nerfed, because if we are, going aggressive on it, which this is what they do. By the way, this is the way they're doing it, is they probably tend to go more aggressive on the cards being good, especially season pass cards, because at the end of the day, sales, like, period, right? That's my thought, at least. And I think this is where some of the anger comes from. It's a tough question to answer.
It is, but I think that like if cards are coming out and they're underwhelming, I think that feels bad for the game. I think it feels like it just feels crappy, right? Cards coming out with like a legitimate impact on the meta, I think are more exciting. I think that the pain point constantly is just it's the resources and how they're restrained for resources on a constant basis. Free-to-play players who are incredibly important to this ecosystem don't have the opportunity through the collector's reserves to accumulate the needed tokens, the spotlight keys, and etc. And when every card is great and nothing truly stands above the rest, like you think about the month with like Sage, Nocturne, and everything, you want all those cards in your collection.
Yeah, that's fair.
You don't have the resources, right? And so when everything is just pretty damn good, you want everything.
I guess for me, I was going underwhelming and conservative. I didn't put as the same thing. For me, conservative is like you look at the meta and you look at, okay, do you want this card to really shake things up, or should it blend in with what's going on a bit? I guess that's where I was going. But they kind of both are the same result at the end of the day. I guess conservative is less pissed off people about a card that they thought was really good. But regardless, things would still change. Regardless, Athena could have been released conservative, or Red Hulk for that matter, and it's been 3 OTAs now to fix it, right? So, like, I think you still have these problems regardless. That's true.
But you know what the risk is with that? If you release something like Hydration Robert, conservative, right? So Hydra Bob comes out, he's conservative, and then they try to buff him before he exits the spotlight caches. And they give like 4 hours notice on that buff. Then it's like, great, they buffed him and I missed the spotlight week. Now he's good. What the? You know what I mean? And people get pissed off.
Totally agree on that. Yeah, and they definitely, if they do that again, they got to do way better than 24 hours to release. And I'm glad they did it, but they need to do way more than that. But I think the all of them powerful and equal and balance is just the perfect world that doesn't happen. Like you can't have all these cards come out where you think they're going to be good and then they don't get nerfed, because then they're just going to end up being hit way more often because they're well above the rest. They're standing out well above the other 2 cost cards, Athena and Blackwood. Like, and so in an ideal world, yeah, I want the cards to be exciting when they come out, all of them, but that will also mean we're going to have things that happen like this.
Yeah, I feel like this might sound silly, and I think we joked about it a couple weeks ago where I said I think we're kind of addicted to power creep, where we want each card to kind of just like push the envelope slightly every single time, right? Just make everything a little better. Like we are so accustomed to the 3-5 baseline stat line on new 3 drops now that like before Polaris was like, that was a great statted card. And now who the hell is going to play it, right? We're just anxious for that little bit of extra power because we want every new card to be so impactful. But it makes it so that like you run the risk of them having to be nerfed so frequently.
With everything I said too, the more I think about it, like hats off, man, to the team for balancing this game. I have enough hard time like okay, Athena can be used in this deck, whatever. Not the best example, but like Sage. There's just an infinite number of there's so many different decks, right? And that's not even taking into like new builds as well. And so like to me, I think this is the best balanced game that I personally have ever played with this many factors involved. Period. I think, and listen, I just was critical, so I want to say, in my head, I feel like if I was a company starting a game, man, I'd hire Glenn Jones in a heartbeat. I'd hire I think they just do a really good job with all of the factors that they have to deal with. And I'm just thinking about that on my end of creating decks, right? And just guys, I don't know their process, man, of making new cards and how long they have access to these, but it's a headache, dude.
And it's gotten better over time. There was a span of time where the balance was really out of whack and really unpredictable, and it has gotten better. So kudos to the team. And if you have any comments about it, we'd love to see them down below. And just maybe we'll bring it up on the Snapchat mailbag, which is our next point of discussion.
We're going to get comments for sure because we represented 2 stances on it. I think they're going to be fun to see down below, guys. So can't wait to read those. Let's talk about the mailbag, man. What do we got this week?
All right, we had a ton of comments, and it goes off of the same thing. We got 2 statements here that I'll read off, then we'll discuss it. The first one comes from Nero the Mana, and it says, "This is my favorite McDonald's podcast," which was then followed up by Aster, who said, "The entire point of Big Bird is that he's a kid caught in an awkward stage of adolescence where they're not quite a kid, but not quite a teenager. That's why his voice is kind of high and nasally, but he's huge and waddles around weirdly. A bit oblivious to some changes in his body because he's not used to it yet. Big Bird is like the poster child for puberty."
If you missed an episode, I love that this is the one you opened up with. Like if you missed it, people are like, what the hell are they talking about here? I apologize to Big Bird. I wasn't familiar with his game. I wasn't the lore. I haven't done a Who is Big Bird segment on my channel. I might have to brush that up. And yes, I'm gonna say this like full confidence. I saw the tweets about this bird from McDonald's. Dude, that's a deep core. That's a deep memory. I still don't know what that is. I think I've seen that bird like once on a Happy Meal. But like in terms of like Marvel popularity, man, that's like way down there.
See, what's hilarious about that whole situation, and if you watch back last week's segment, you can pick up on this, was that I thought that Birdie, the early bird, that's the McDonald one, was Big Bird. But no one gave me crap for that. I thought that was Big Bird and that it was like core McDonald's lore. And then so like I thought Birdie was Big Bird. You thought Birdie didn't even exist, but you obviously knew who Big Bird was.
I was blown away that like Big Bird in me is like the Captain America compared to Birdie, who's like a I don't know,
U.S. agent.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dude, that's a great example. Yeah.
So, anyways, a really fun discussion, and Cozy in his Canadian ass McDonald's comments. I gotta get you some McDonald's here in Canada. It's actually pretty good.
I've had it in Africa, so I assume it's they do pretty good. But the anywhere you go, it tastes the same. That's their whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. That is true. What I will say is when I was in the United States, you guys have some crazy burger places. And I'm not sure if they're good. Like I had Jack in the Box and I was like, this is like a mess, but I'm like, I kind of like it. Like I felt like the heart attack coming on while I was eating it.
Yeah. That's their
goal. I was
goal.
like, pretty badass burger.
So here's the deal. Okay. Jack in the Box. You guys know if you're in your mid-20s and up, you just go there when you're drunk. Like, that's it. It's a drunk burger place. They're open 24/7.
That's like their specialty. That's their niche.
So say what you just said, right? And think about that. And think about being a little bit hammered. Then it's perfect. Then you're like, I'll take everything.
So then what's like a Carl's Jr.?
It's like there's like a mid-tier burger. Like, you know how like Subs, there's like, you know, cheap Subway, which they're not cheap anymore. But then, you know, and you got that they're like kind of different. Charbroiled or whatever.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, all I know is we were driving around the States and we're like, man, there's so many burger places here. You guys take fast food so serious. There's so many types of fast food in the States. And I got to tell you, I was interested in all of them. As we go into our next question from Jonathan Happy, which reads, you are absolutely right about Nomura. This entire week, I kept switching between 4 of the top decks to get to Infinite. I kept flip-flopping between 91 and 93. I noticed that not many people were running Cosmo, so I pulled out a Nomura deck, and 1 hour, I went from 93 to 100. Oh. Absolutely crazy deck that no one expects right now.
Nice, man. There's nothing better than hearing a Snapchat listener like use, you know, some of this stuff and have success with it.
Yeah, and Nomura is absolutely cracked. I think that whole shell works really well with like the White Tigers. Odin. Tigers got like they're 8 power. Like they are 8 power. A lot of people may not even realize that they did get buffed at some point. It's a fantastic deck, and Nomura is supposed to be data mined into an upcoming Spotlight cache. So you don't necessarily need to commit the 6,000 tokens if you got some keys ready. And our next question comes from Leems19. With the activates coming out soon, who are your biggest nominations for an activate rework? Personally, I think that Forge could be a really interesting activate card.
Forge? Huh. Yeah, I don't know if I thought about Forge. Dude, I mean, listen, we all go back to Zabu. I think Zabu to me makes the most sense to hold on to something of that, you know, ability that could be super unique and holding it. And there's going to be some really good ones coming out. Outside of that, I'm not sure, man. I think you could do cool stuff that would change the card too much. Like Dracula, I'm like, it'd be cool to be able to get that discard to pop off whenever you want it to. Probably wouldn't want it that way, though. So I don't know. I'm going to go with Zabu as like my safe answer.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. I am expecting when they do a patch for this upcoming season that we're going to have a bunch of cards change to activate cards. And I think there's a bit of a tell in the Spotlight caches. There's one major one that I think is likely to get changed to an activate card. And Zabu's in the Spotlight caches. I think Zabu 100% is going to get changed. The other one is Super Giant. I think Super Giant's ability is just perfect for activate. Imagine if Super Giant's a 2/3, and then when you activate Super Giant, the next time they play, it's like a Lemuria effect. Yeah, I think that is so perfect.
I like that one a lot. There's a couple like really cool, like they do effects right now, but they're not meta because they're awkward. Like Black Swan's another example. It'd be great to be able to on curve play Black Swan and activate it when you need to. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. I'm interested in those kind of cards. I think Supergiant's a really good pull there. Love it. My early sleeper of of 2024. Yeah, I like that one. I like that one a ton. What about something like Gambit? That would be crazy, where you don't have the risk and you can like play them and then do the thing later.
I mean, that would be cracked. Gambit, he destroys a card on the other side. Like, that is legitimately insane, because you can play him down on curve, because Gambit's a card that disproportionately benefits from being played late. Sometimes, if they're playing a card that you want to get rid of, he's better early. But if you want to hit a high priority, bigger target, like Gilgamesh drops on turn 6, I mean, that's a zoo deck. It's pretty hard to hit Gilgamesh. You know what I mean, though, right? Like, bigger bodies out on bigger turns. Gambit's able to kind of hit a bigger priority target on the later game.
My cogs are spinning more. What about location changers? So hear me out. So Magic and Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch has been needing desperate change. How cool would it be if like Scarlet was like a whatever stats or the same, and you play her out there just like kind of have her, and that person has to keep thinking in their head, are they going to change this? Are they not? Magic, you put her out on any turn, and now the authority's in your hands. You still have to do it before 5 to make it fair, but the authority's in your hands. Or you just play her on the location like one that benefit the Onslaught Citadel or whatever, right? And they've got to wonder what you're doing, right? Maybe you have a Tribunal deck that you want that, and now you just play. You know what I mean? I think that could be a cool thing.
That's cool. I had this power fantasy of like Scarlet Witch. You play her down as like a 2/3 or 2/4 or something, and her activate is randomly change all the locations. So she goes like this and just pew, 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 pew. Like, she's so powerful, right? Think about what Westview is in the lore, right? She could change all of them. She doesn't need to change one.
Scarlet Witch is by far the most like. It's getting there to be the most disrespected, like, especially lore-wise, bro. Scarlet's like, she's like one of the most powerful beings in Marvel. So, like, being a garbage card. Let's face it.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because, like, I was watching Infinity War and Endgame, and she almost, like, minor spoiler, I guess, she almost solos Thanos straight up. Like, if you actually watch that and pay attention to who's doing what, she literally almost completely solos the Mad Titan with the stones in his hand. Like, she's so unbelievably strong.
Technically like Wanda, right? Like Scarlet Witch versus all of Kamar Tosh. Like, straight up, she just wrecks all of the entire fortress of Doctor Strange and friends completely, like from the ground up, right? Like, that's the power, and that's with her not even being she gets even stronger. So yeah, but that's my new buff candidate.
Yeah, most certainly. And our next question comes from Anakin. How unwise is it that I'm using all my tokens for ultimate variants?
Dude, do what you want to do, man. I love that for you. I do. I force myself to use ultimate variants because they're just not seen a lot. It's cool to see skins, or in this case, variants that people don't get to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're pretty damn cool, but if you're a free-to-play player, I would certainly not recommend using them on your ultimate variants. But I do have a couple ultimate variants. I haven't bought the Iron Man one yet because I think I have another one I might like better, and I'm not willing to invest into that God split that you have, right? So if I had that split, then maybe I'd buy it.
Like Storm, Mystique, Magic, those are three. Well, Mystique have an ultimate, but Storm and Magic are two examples of, I'm sure their ultimates would be crack, but I don't care. They have too many good variants. Like, no matter what they pump out, they're too good.
Yeah, and our last question of the day comes from Dallas Stars. And you might be thinking, Dallas Stars, that sounds familiar. Yes, the NHL team Dallas Stars. And the question reads, we just found out that Cozy played hockey as a child, and I'm sure that Alex did too. Who are your favorite players? Maybe one retired, one current? Cheers, boys. Keep up the great work.
Oh my gosh. Go first, because I got two.
Okay. So my absolute favorite player growing up, without question, this is retired, was Jerome McGinley, the captain of the Calgary Flames. And Jerome was just an incredible player. And for those that don't know him, he was a captain. He came from very modest upbringing, tremendous player, represented Team Canada at all stages of his career. He was the type of captain that in basically the Stanley Cup final, he fought like he's the captain. He goes into a fight, puts his helmet onto the ice, scraps Vincent Lecavalier, the other captain on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, he was like the guy. He was the guy for that team, the guy for that franchise. And I thought, like, as a hockey player, he stood just amongst the absolute greats in terms of composure and just being the face of a franchise.
Okay. I respect it. I like the breakdown. There's two for me, both different teams, both like why these two. So I was in Colorado. I lived for about 5 years. Our neighbor was Patrick Wall, the Patrick Wall. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Crazy, right? So Long story short, ended up getting to know their family really well. And he wasn't in like a nice, super nice house. It's great, like at all, nothing of the sort. And my dad took me to so many Avalanche games. And so over time, I just became obsessed with him. And I'm like, I know him. That's the guy, like the Leonardo meme, right? And so that got me obsessed with the Avalanche for a while. And so just watching him in his legendary career. And then to throw it back to my dad, again, a lot of my family, East Coast, even though I was in the South, Bobby Orr. For those big Boston Bruin fans, Bobby Orr, legend, absolute legend in my house. Had a jersey in my office when I worked in corporate for a very long time. So Bobby Orr, Patrick, I think those are like deeper cuts, man. I thought one of us would be like Wayne Gretzky, but I'm proud of us over here.
Yeah, and we didn't pick current ones, but the last one that I'll mention here is similar to yours, like in terms of the goaltending. Now, Patrick Waugh at the time, he was playing on Montreal, and I was always a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Okay.
And so when he basically told his coach off and said, I'm leaving this city. I'm going to win the Stanley Cup. And then went to Colorado and did exactly that. Right? It was absolutely insane. He he basically called, I'm going to win the Stanley Cup somewhere else. And he literally did it. I loved Felix Potvin at the time. That was the same era, right? Felix the Cat.
Oh yeah.
And I play goaltender. I play both positions. I don't know if you know this about hockey. I'm the most versatile guy in men's league. I play both goalie and player equally poorly. But this is fun. I honestly, it took me by surprise. You're a hockey guy. Maybe one of these days we'll have to go for a skate since you won't take me on your Vespa.
Let's do it, man. Sounds good, buddy. Sounds good. Love the hockey. I love been talking to you 2 years straight and still finding out facts, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. We sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. Ask your questions for the mailbag, and we'll see you on the next Marvel Snapchat episode.